Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast. This is episode 185. We are recording on a rainy Tuesday evening, but hey, we need the rain here in New Orleans. So with me as always, I'm Aaron, by the way. With me as always is Fredo and Dave, the other members of the Who Dat Jedi Council. How are we doing, guys?
Doing good. Doing good.
Yeah, doing okay.
It is nice to get some rain. So problem is that here we got, did either one of you guys go to Chewbacca's? Because the weather was not very parade friendly. It was cold.
No, I was mentioning to a friend of ours that everybody that I know that went to Chewbacca's went to the start of the parade, which because the parade started rolling at 7 o'clock, which probably gave you a bit warmer experience than where we normally catch it, which is towards the end of the parade route, and you get that wind tunnel effect going down to Cater. So I discretion being the better part of valor, I opted to stay home. It was cold.
Yeah, we stayed home. I mean, we got an army of kids that were just begging to get sick at that point. So it was like, and for anybody who's like not in this area, like COVID and flu and RSV are just running rampant in our community right now. So,
well, and of course we have a Crew de Vue on this coming Saturday, and it looks like it's going to be rainy on Saturday. So, but at least it'll be like in the 70s. So, I don't know. So we'll see what happens. But we are carnival season is cold, rain, some nice health, sickness. It's like your marriage vows. So, it's like all those things rolled up into one. So I will say this. Actually, Fredo and I were talking about it this past weekend. I went out to Galaxy's Edge with a couple 501st friends. It's something we planned several months back because one of them had a ticket that they had to use by the end of the year or within a year or something like that. And so we went out, stayed off property. But just the first day we actually did a little bit of, we dressed up, did a little cosplaying and stuff like that. Played the bounty hunter game, which, that's what, so first of all, it's an addiction. All the beeping, and getting credits and everything like that is like you had to get 20 bounties to join the bounty guild. And so after day one, after I had 12 on my first day, I was like, well, dang it, I got to get the other 8. So it's just but it did look like a cool thing for like kids to do and stuff like that it doesn't cost any money. You just scan your magic band. It's basically a game of hot cold. You kind of walk around in your magic band plus. You need a magic band plus, and it kind of beeps faster and faster and faster as you get closer to your target, and then you use your phone to scan the doorway and you collect your bounty. And then you got to go to this creepy dude. It's a video screen, but a creepy dude to give you he's the guild master. But it was, like I said, it was kind of fun. Just addictive. We rode Smuggler's Run, and like a 5-year-old kid was the pilot. Actually, no, he was younger than 5. He was probably 3 to 4. And we're getting on. And so it was like, and Mom said, we're going to be pilots this time. And, the 3 of us are like going, oh, this is going to be, we're going to throw up. But what ended up happening was that Mom was in Chewie's seat and the kid was in Han's seat, and Mom ended up like flying both sides of the Falcon. Oh, we crashed into everything, but it was hilarious. It was hilarious. And the kid had a blast. So, yeah,
that's the whole point, right?
But the best part was one of the last times we rode it, we went in and, they have the Hondo Naka animatronic. And halfway through his spiel, Hondo has a stroke. He just goes completely limp, just like he's talking. All of a sudden, and they hustled everybody out of the room. It was like, go to the front, everybody get out. Because I don't know, they didn't want kids to be traumatized because Hondo like had a stroke. He kept on talking, but it was kind of funny. Then the next time we went in, there was a black sheet covering Hondo. So,
Sorry, kids. Honda's taking a much needed break.
yeah. But so that was kind of fun. Like I said, it was just
No, but
we didn't do anything else except really hang around Galaxy's Edge. The second day I went and I rode Tower of Terror a couple times, but it was just to kick around, be nerds. So
I was going to say, and I think that that's a smart thing that Disney knows. I mean, Disney knows how to develop parks, and Bounty Hunter games a great way to keep, because how many rides you have at Galaxy's Edge? You have two.
yeah, too.
Rebels Run, Rides of the Resistance. But you still want everybody to stay in the land and go around and see everything, experience everything, and hopefully nudge nudge go towards the merchandising tables and
All right.
purchase something. So what's a great way to do that? You give them a game, you have people running around, you have experiences. Again, Disney knows how to do their job in terms of making sure they keep you there and keep you excited.
So one of the things I got to thinking about is what do you guys think the possibility of Hondo being in Skeleton Crew? He's obviously alive in the timeline, except for he survived the stroke he had at Galaxy's Edge when I was there because the next day he was fine. But he's obviously alive in the timeline if Galaxy's Edge is, Time of the Resistance and stuff like that. So where Skeleton Crew is happening, and there's going to be pirates. So could they have Hondo?
Yeah. I see no reason why not. I mean, it's an interesting concept in terms of bringing him on board because,
He's such a
he
good
doesn't make
character.
so much sense in some, in a show like Ahsoka. It doesn't make sense there. But it does make perfect sense with something like Skeleton Crew.
Yeah, I agree. That'd be a good way to fold him back in if they wanted to. But there's also, Bad Batch, right? He's floating about at that point. That I wouldn't rule that one out either.
Well, like I said, he's it's cool because the character that they have on the video screen in Smuggler's Run is the guy who voiced Hondo, and they've got him in full makeup, and he looks like Hondo Onaka. So they know we can do it. So I think that would be a great character if they're gonna keep bringing back characters, but he's a good one, and especially since he had this affinity for Ezra. That might be a way to get him into the movies that are coming. So I don't know.
It's part of his redemptive arc, really. He was, I don't know. I found him kind of obnoxious, Clone Wars era, but by the time he turned back up in Rebels, I was like, oh no, at first, but he quickly won me over.
Yeah,
and I was glad to have him.
That was the first time I'd seen him was in Rebels, and then when I went to Clone Wars, I was kind of put off for a minute because he was really quite a baddie. I mean, he wasn't the fun-loving, I don't know. Hondo always seemed, he had selfish intent in Rebels, but it seemed like his heart, won over. I don't know, in Rebels, but in Clone Wars, he seemed very much, a baddie. So I don't know. I think he'd be a good one to have in that show.
It's kind of the Jack Sparrow of the Star Wars universe, right?
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So like I said, played nerd, but cool. Well, tonight actually. So what we're going to be talking about. Yesterday we got a big old surprise. Not only did we get a trailer for Bad Batch Season 3, but we got all the dates, and we found out when all those are coming out, and it's sooner than we thought, and so we'll get to that in a little bit. First, we need to do trivia. Dun, 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 dun. All right. Let's see. Shuffle the cards. All right. Dave, to you. Oh, softball. Who is the first character seen in The Empire Strikes Back? Who is the first character seen in The Empire Strikes Back?
I think it's Luke Skywalker.
It is Luke Skywalker. Yep.
Yeah.
Can I get pedantic there for a moment? Technically speaking, isn't it the probe droid?
If we want to count the probe droid, this is what I thought. Like,
But you're right.
probably not
Yeah,
what they meant. Yeah.
I know, I know. Like I
Yeah.
said, no, pushing the glasses up the nose, and let's get quite pedantic about the answer.
So there's another thing. Talk about an iconic sound.
Oh
Yep,
yeah.
the chatter of the probe droid. Such an iconic sound in the Star Wars universe. It's, I mean, again, we were talking about it this weekend. I've said it on the show before that the thing that bothered me about the sequel trilogy is that the blasters didn't sound like a wrench hitting a wire. Didn't sound like the blasters from every other Star Wars movie. So some of those, like I said, when we've talked about, I can take new characters and new stories and just totally new things as long as everything kind of looks and sounds like Star Wars. So
That was one of the sounds that really made a big impact on me as a child because I would impersonate that droid, just for fun. Exactly.
I mean, it's just obviously we both had the same rhythm. There's a rhythm to what this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so. Yeah, and Steven, who we had on, about the Galactic Star Cruiser, he said that there is actually 3D print models of Probe Droid, and said somebody has made it, and the thing is like huge. So.
Oh yeah, that'd be gigantic.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. So I digress. All right, Fredo, to you. What does Darth Maul control using a wristband comlink? What does
It seems
Darth
like
Maul control using a wristband comlink?
they seem like they're tied. These
All
questions.
right, that's funny. This is a totally different card.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna go with probe droid as well.
Oh, it could be. I could be a real jerk and say it's a Sith probe droid, but it is a probe droid. Yes. All right. Oh, come on.
Did you not get a probe droid question?
No. What's the largest creature seen in all 6 movies? Okay, well, actually, this is easy. I'll read it again, though, for dramatic effect. What is the largest creature seen in all 6 movies? That's going to be the space slug.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, the big sock puppet. I was going to actually go for the big fish in Phantom Menace. But yeah, no, then I realized that forgot about the space slug. All right. Hey. Yep. 2 probe droids and a space slug. All right. Well, let's move on to the first. Oh, and by the way, I said we're going to be talking about Bad Batch, obviously. But then we're also going to be talking about a video game that is maybe kind of linked. It got Dave's motor humming here when, as we were seeing the trailer and stuff like that. So we'll talk about Dark Forces a little bit as well. But first, let's talk about Bad Batch Season 3. Fredo, do you have dates for when all that's coming out?
Yes, I do.
Not nodding on an
yesterday
audio podcast does not help anybody, just so you know.
Well, I feel that the people listening can hear and sense the nod. Yes, I have the dates. So, yesterday we got not only the trailer for season 3 of Bad Batch. We got confirmation of that it's going to premiere February 21st. And what's interesting is it's a 3-episode premiere. So you're getting 3 episodes of a 15-episode season right out the gate, February 21st. And you get a couple of days where you're going to get 2 episodes. And then the season finale will drop May 1st. So I can tell you the episode titles if you like also, because it's interesting. They released all that. Before we get into that, I'm sure you want to talk about some of what we saw in the trailer.
Well, I mean, go ahead. Let's talk about talk about the dates and the titles. That's cool because I think that just kind of sets the stage a little bit. I think that's fine.
Okay. Okay. So let's see. February 21st, you get season premiere Confined, Paths Unknown, and Shadows of Tantus. February 28th, you get A Different Approach. March 6th, The Return. I'm guessing that might be Rex. I don't know. March 13th, you get two episodes, Infiltration and Extraction. March 20th, you get Bad Territory. March 27th, you get The Harbinger. April 3rd, you get two episodes again, Identity Crisis and Point of No Return. And then after that, it's just an episode a week until the finale. So you go Juggernaut, Into the Breach, Flash Strike, and the season finale on May 1st. The Cavalry Has Arrived.
Dun dun dun. Yeah, I mean, as always, the titles really. I mean, they don't give away a whole lot. Um, I will say, let's maybe skip to the end here a little bit because there was one in there that you said the return, and you said you thought maybe Rex.
But
I mean, I think the big thing that made everybody stand up and go, "Huh?" was at the end of the trailer. Spoiler alert, everybody. If you don't want to be spoiled by this, then turn off the podcast and listen later. But I mean, it's really not, or go watch the trailer and then come back. We all good? Okay. So at the end, Asajj Ventress is in the trailer, and she's going to be in Bad Batch season 3. Well, there's a couple things. First of all, Asajj Ventress was Count Dooku's apprentice in the Clone Wars, and then she kind of became a bounty hunter. But the big wiggity woo is that she's supposed to be dead because in the book Dark Disciple, which is a book that it was a storyline from I think a couple arcs of Clone Wars that never got recorded or never got made. But she teams up with Quinlan Voss and Obi-Wan Kenobi and to fight Count Dooku, and Dooku is shooting force lightning at one of them, and she steps in and takes it, and apparently gets killed and taken to Dathomir to be, I suppose, buried or whatever. But she's back. So, and StarWars.com actually, it was funny because I was watching Making Star Wars, Jason Ward's podcast he was recording on Twitter, and I watched it last night. And he pointed out that StarWars.com is getting out in front of this saying, don't worry, Asajj Ventress coming back will not get in the way of any previously written stories. Basically is what it says. So it's all going to work. They did not, retcon or negate the Dark Disciple. So, no, I guess let's talk about that. I mean, Asajj Ventress, why would we be bringing her back? What would she add to the Bad Batch? Let's just talk a little bit. I have some ideas.
Give us your ideas.
Okay, well, one is, and I've always said that I think Bad Batch is not. It's not the show is not about the Bad Batch. The show is a vehicle to do other things in the greater Star Wars story. And I think by bringing in Asajj Ventress, who was a Night Sister, and she's buried on Dathomir. Could this be the way that they explain, and I don't know how it all worked, but could this be how they explain the witches of Dathomir being banished to Peridia that we saw in Ahsoka? Because that is the one thing that we're sitting there going, how did the Night Sisters get banished? Most of them were dead, but obviously there has to be some sort of resurrection that happens, probably through Night Sister magic or something like that. or there's some Night Sisters. Maybe it's the three that ended up on Peridia or what. Anyway, how did everybody get banished to Peridia? Maybe this is a way. Maybe Ventress gets in the way of Palpatine or something, and he gets mad, and I don't know. That's one idea.
Well, I was gonna say just right quick, it's interesting you bring Ventress back because the guy who's front and center in a lot of stuff is Palpatine. So I mean, you haven't had, the Bad Batch so far have shined in terms of being different because they haven't had any of the Force stuff. This has been a show that, outside of Order 66 at the very onset, has not had to deal with Force sensitive people, Jedi, Force users, any of that stuff. So, except for now, Palpatine's going to be there. And so you figure you got to have somebody who's willing to take him on, or maybe somebody who's able to oppose him on that level. And it can't be Hunter, Record, or, any of our guys. So maybe bringing Ventress in. Now, of course, they say that nothing in Dark Disciple is getting retcon, but let's also be fair. We just saw the Night Sisters, bring back from the dead a whole slew of stormtroopers on in Peridia. So who knows what kind of state we're going to Saj Ventress. But it is interesting. I think it's put it this way, the natural reaction is just to be excited. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I think if we get any sort of like explanation, it would be brief. Maybe a couple lines here at the end of an episode or something to get us all excited. And then next week's show, they drop it entirely, like that kind of thing. But I guess like if we were to put odds on it, I'd say the odds are pretty decent that it might tie in with, if not the situation in Ahsoka, at least the Night Sisters in some general way. And the thing about her character, though, is if we're gonna sit here and sort of analyze like why her,
Mm-hmm.
She's more of a anarchist, for lack of a better term, by this point. I think like by the end of her run in Clone Wars, um, she had felt wronged and discarded, as these characters are wont to do on the dark side. They tend to get discarded.
Now, what's interesting,
And
sorry, I'm just hold
yeah.
that thought just because what's interesting is and I haven't read Dark Disciple. I just got a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of yesterday doing some research, but Quinlan Voss and Obi-Wan Kenobi call her a friend to the Jedi. So yes, I mean, an anarchist, but she has an interesting arc for a baddie. She's complicated to be sure, but keep on going.
Yeah, no, like by the end of Clone Wars, like she is actively helping them, but you don't really know if she has a different objective in mind than they do, other than revenge. Um, and so, um, yeah, I use the term anarchist because she will introduce this level of unpredictability to a story, and she's kind of a wild card. And I would anticipate that would be her role in this. Like, what if um, we saw Cad Bane in the trailer?
Yeah, we
What
did.
if Cad Bane gets pulled in to oppose our heroes, so they feel like they need to bring in some extra muscle? And oh, by the way, she's available. Our circles have become intertwined with hers, and she's willing to help. Um, a kind of evener of the odds situation potentially. But like I said, like I would almost be disappointed if she wasn't just inserting those crumbs of doubt in your mind at various points. Like, wait a minute, is she being honest here? Do we think we can trust her? Like that sort of thing.
So the other interesting thing, this is my other thought, and this is kind of tinfoil hat and all the yarn from picture to picture on the whiteboard. but with her connection to Quinlan Voss, and Quinlan Voss being name dropped in Obi-Wan Kenobi as being one of the people who helped Jedi get, you know, on the path, the, basically shuttling Jedi after Order 66. Um, and I've said for a long time that I think Omega is force sensitive. So could is maybe Asajj Ventress is involved in the path, trying to get Jedi, working with Quinlan Voss to get, Jedi, safe and secure, and maybe she's the one that's going to be getting Omega to where she needs to be, safe and sound away from the Empire.
Yeah, because it's
Thoughts?
interesting. We don't see either Asajj Ventress nor Omega again in the story. I mean, so at some point they have to disappear from the stage, so to speak, because they're not
And they
involved in
can
the original
certainly
trilogy.
disappear and then come back like for Dave Filoni's movie. Anyway, just that's a
Well,
stretch. Keep on going, Fredo.
Ahsoka's no, but Ahsoka season two, maybe. Again, we're talking about the Night Sisters. They're gonna be an elder. No, a certain Grand Admiral's headed towards Dathomir. So the idea of maybe finding Asajj there and her adult Padawan Omega there as well. It does bring an interesting question. Do you think that Omega is going to be separated from the Bad Batch? Do you think the Bad Batch are going to have to almost kind of like go on a suicide mission of
What were
we will
the
sacrifice ourselves, but she gets away free?
what were the last couple of titles?
Last couple of titles were Into the Breach, Flash Strike, and the Cavalry has arrived.
But there was one like Point of No Return or something like I don't know.
Yeah,
It,
Point of No Return, episode
just
11.
totally guessing right there. But it's kind of like when you're watching football and it's like number 65 has reported as eligible. It's
Mhm.
like the main thing is like, okay, why did we bring in somebody as okay, we're probably doing a run play because we need another big guy who can block and then potentially maybe catch it. So it's like they're not going to bring in a Asajj Ventress just cuz. There's
Right.
several characters from the Clone Wars that you could bring back. So why this one and why in particular a force like you said, Fredo, we haven't seen really any. Have we seen any Jedi in
Bad
Bad
Batch?
Batch?
No, not for
Listeners, check us if we're wrong. But I mean, so then why do
that's
you bring, you know, why do you bring in a force wielder into a story that hasn't
hasn't really
needed one? That's the thing. It's like, so, I mean, yeah, you're right. We got Cad Bane coming back. We got Fennec Shand is coming back after being gone for a season. Um, you know,
I just looked up the answer to the "Are there any Jedi?" question. Caleb Doom in episode 1, and that's basically it.
Order
that's
66.
Order
Yeah.
66. Yep.
Yeah.
So you see what I
So
mean? It's like that. Those are the kind. That's why I start thinking it's like, oh, some are just like, oh, it's a neat cameo, and it's like, okay, but they're they're just not going to bring back a character from the dead, you know, just cause. So I don't know. That's why I got spinning on that.
well, I do think like there's merit in the idea of you bring her back to do more with her. You don't bring her back for a 3-episode arc in the Bad Batch and then kill her off again.
Right.
So like that much, I'm 100% in agreement on. Are we gonna see tie-ins in Ahsoka? Or is it gonna be Night Sister stuff and Dathomir stuff? It's like I don't know. I mean, maybe, probably, possibly. I don't know.
And of course,
But it's fun. It is fun to speculate.
yeah, the big question also is what are they doing? What are they doing on Tantus? What are they doing with? I mean, it's obviously a cloning program. For a long time I've said they're trying to, well, we know in Rise of Skywalker that we're trying to develop a force sensitive clone. I mean, so and it was actually kind of interesting. Everybody was saying, the at least the podcast that listened to and the video reactions stuff like that. They said, um, hey, if this stuff makes Rise of Skywalker better by explaining the Exegol stuff, and all the cloning things that Palpatine was wanting to do to make sure he lived forever. Awesome. That's why I've always said Bad Batch is not necessarily a story about clones. This group of clones. It's a vehicle to kind of connect some dots, and I'm okay with that. But so what? I mean, what do we think is going on? Because Palpatine has an interesting line in the trailer. He says basically, if this is what we need to do to secure the success of the Empire, then you get everything you need. I don't know. What'd you think of that line? By the way, Ian McDermott, which was awesome. So
Yeah, and like whenever you see the Emperor just like pop up, and two, like the stakes are higher now, right? Our heroes are in more danger just by his presence. So, uh, yeah, I think I agree with you 100% on the idea of if you're going to do a show centered around clones, that it makes a lot of sense to start talking about cloning in Star Wars and what that looks like and where are you going to see it in other ways and how does this stuff tie in and like who are the cloners and what's their story and getting more backstory there and um, all of these things are logical progressions from that because that's pretty unmined territory. Um, like when we all saw, well, when we all heard about the Clone Wars when we were kids, we're like, what is that all about? And then Attack of the Clones was the name of episode 2, and we're like, well, oh my gosh, we're gonna get the Clone Wars. Like what clones. We're gonna learn more about the clones, and we're gonna find all this stuff out. And I don't know that they've necessarily delivered on that promise, really, to this point.
I'm sorry. I just had, and this is related to what you're talking about because we're talking about clones. I just had a thought as you were talking. Ahsoka, all the caskets that are being loaded onto a Star Destroyer, we all just assumed what those were. There are in this storyline in the Bad Batch, I'm going to get back, and it's getting back to what I was talking about earlier. In the Bad Batch, there are still a lot of clones serving the Empire. Whole bunch. They haven't systematically wiped them all out. What if is in those caskets are dead clones or clones in hibernation or something? Maybe that's what Palpatine did to get rid of everybody. And Thrawn discovers them and brings them back. And do we have a whole army of zombie clones? I know this is sounding totally goofy, but I mean,
Point. I mean, and I think this is what makes this is turning this show into something more interesting. This is no longer, like you're saying, a story of just the Bad Batch. It's not just a story of these four, five, six characters that we've gotten to know over the last two seasons. This is now a story that has tie-ins not only to everything that came before it, but also seems to have ramifications and impacts on the story going forward, on everything we're going to see, whether it's Ahsoka season two, whether it's the Mando verse movie that Dave Filoni is making. It seems like it's going to be laying a lot of the groundwork to connect everything from this period to the sequel trilogy and everything in between. That's what makes it a bit interesting and also a bit daring that they're willing to do it here. They're not doing it on a skeleton crew. They're not doing it on something like even the acolyte, a live action show. They're telling you when it's time to do your summer reading, you go, how does this all tie in? You got to go back and see this animated kids show from a few years back and get to know these characters, and then you'll see how it all connects.
God, there's a lot there, right? And we didn't even we haven't uttered the name Snoke yet, right? But like obviously that's a big piece of this puzzle too. Um, I have my thoughts about dark forces and dark troopers, and we're going to get into that in a few minutes, probably. Um, but it's regardless of like the payoff on all of that, and I'm trying to again like temper expectations because it feels like the way with Star Wars is give you a little bit and then give you more questions, and so that's probably going to be what we get. We're going to get a little bit and then like well wait now I have 50 more questions so now what and then the roll credits um so I that would be my like point of caution with all of this, but it is so much fun. This is what makes Star Wars fun is like thinking about these things like well, what you were talking about like um these all these caskets like what's in those caskets we don't know, right? What if it's like a Sith burial ground? This is an army
Korriban.
of Sith, right? Um, like go wild with that, Like now suddenly, you've got
Yeah, I mean,
Luke Skywalker and Grogu against an army of Sith. I mean,
yes, that would be absolutely. But again, my point is that we have some missing pieces of puzzles, and we've talked about this. Like, what the hell happened to all of the clones?
Mm-hmm.
mhm.
That is still something we don't have an answer for. And so that's why if I was to put my money down, I like probably going to be totally wrong. It's probably going to be a bunch of little Grogu's or Noki or whatever. Um, but but that is one of those things where I hadn't thought about it until just now. It's like there's again, how did the Night Sisters and why did the Night Sisters, those three at least, we know there are three that got banished. How and why? What's in all those caskets? And I never thought that they could explain that within the Bad Batch, but maybe they will. I think that's, yeah, you're right. It's fun to speculate. I have no, it's one of those things where it seemed like a logical step. Um, and like I said, maybe there were clone troopers who maybe, like I said, banished and they all died there. And I don't know, whatever. Um,
My money's on half-witted, half-formed Snokes. It's just like there's zombified Snokes. That's all it
Zombie
is.
Snokes, Zombie Snokes. No, I was going to say, we haven't had, and I'm not sure, I haven't checked the canon recently. In Legends, there's used to be this planet called Korriban. It's one of those ancient Sith planets where all these tombs of these Sith lords would go. And whenever you play with those Knights of the Old Republic, or even some of the more recent games, even included Korriban up to a point, where it'd be a planet where you go and have to traverse through these tombs of Sith lords and encounter all this dark side stuff. So it wouldn't surprise me, if you told me, okay, a lot of those caskets are all ancient Sith, you know, Force users, all that other stuff. At some point we've come to understand that the idea of the force is something that not everybody gets, but it's something that everybody wants on their side. And it's interesting that whereas say somebody like Thrawn is hitching his wagon, so to speak, to the Night Sisters, the move that Palpatine chose to do was, okay, I want to live forever. I could do that through the tragedy of Dark Plagueis of the Wise, but maybe I can do it through cloning. So, and we know the thing is, we know that at some point it works because somehow Palpatine returned and he's wielding Force lightning at the end of Episode 9. So we know that he's got his Force powers with him, as a clone. So it's going to be interesting how they traverse it because it's not a story being told in one show or in one book or in one through line. It's being you're getting pieces here and a piece there and a big story hook here and a moment there. So I wonder, like at some point, it's all gonna have to fit seamlessly, like a Lego set of Legos being put together.
So
You,
anything?
you
Oh,
asked
go ahead.
uh,
Go ahead, Dave.
well,
No.
briefly. You asked earlier if you think our girl will end up with the Bad Batch at the end of this, Omega, and I think
Mhm.
no. Um, I don't think they're going to get that sort of happy ending, but um, I do think they'll get her out of there. And where she ends up, like you said, like on the run in hiding, that doesn't sound like the worst potential outcome for her.
The other thing that we saw that's interesting, there was a shot of Crosshair with Hunter. So at some point, because we saw it from early on that, Crosshair is stuck, in that facility and he's not having a good time. So it's gonna be interesting to see how they bring him back into the fold. And 'cause that's the other thing that lost in all this, and this is what Aaron's bigger point is. Lost in all this, unfortunately, there is a story of these characters who've lost one of their brothers, have one of their brothers betray them, and now they're like, we got to go rescue their little sister, and they have no help whatsoever around them that they can call upon because Tech went off in his way. Rex is out doing his own thing. They got betrayed at the end of last season, so
Well,
it's very much they're very much now on their own, and that's usually from what we've seen of the clones when they're on their own, they're the most vulnerable.
and it's before we then we can. Well, I want to say this, then I have one last question, then we can merge to the Dark Forces stuff. But it's Rogue One, for example, was not. I mean, the overall, I suppose, goal of Rogue One was not to tell the story of this crew. It was about how did the rebels get the Death Star plans. That was the purpose of that movie. In the telling of that movie, you grow very close to Cassian Andor and Jyn Erso and all the others in that crew, but you're not gonna know everything about Bodhi Rook because at the end of the day, it wasn't about Bodhi Rook. Um, so again, the Bad Batch, and a lot of people have been critical of the Bad Batch that it's just kind of I don't know, seems to be without purpose, you know, almost. And but it's like again, I've always said the overall purpose of this show is to, you know, kind of bridge the gap of other storylines because otherwise Star Wars is very herky jerky, you know. So so I do think that so anytime I think when you say temper expectations, you know, if we get a something that's going to be called, you know, Lando, is it necessarily going to be about Lando or is it going to be to serve some other purpose in the overall story? And Lando is just the vehicle to do that. I mean, that can kind of stay rhetorical. My other question I just wanted to say was um, anything else in the trailer that caught your eye, like, oh, cool, or oh, wow. Um,
Uh, what you call Republic Commandos. And if you don't, again, I've watched lyrically in past episodes about Republic Commando video game, and I believe that character that we see that's leading the defense of the clone facilities is Scorch from the video game, which is what a turn. I did not expect that from him, but I'll leave that there for those of you who play the video game. You'll get what I'm saying.
Fredo, I've started playing the game upon your reflection or your recommendation, and
Mhm.
I've been enjoying it so far. It's interesting.
No, I was just gonna say it's a fun game, and you can totally tell it's an early to mid aughts video game, very much influenced by everything from Call of Duty to some of the other Battlefront, some of the other stuff that was out there and popular at the time. But really well done. Just that's all I'll say. But yeah, it was fun that they bring that character from that piece into this
Mhm.
because yeah, I'll just say it's interesting, and I'm kind of glad that they did that because it means it's not dead. They popped up here and there in Clone Wars. It's another little detail I'll say.
I think the thing that really jumped out at me was Omega and Crossfire, um,
Crosshair.
Crosshair, crossing paths, and just I
He looks
don't.
beaten.
He's. I think he's so important to this story. He's been the most interesting character since day one, and I think like he's going to ultimately have to make the sacrifice play. And I think that that's where his story ends because he doesn't have a place. We've been sometimes we've been harsh on this series and oh, what's the point, etc. Um, but the point is these people that are basically soldiers that have to reintegrate into society, and so what does that look like for different individuals? Some people cannot do it, um, and that's going to be his reality. Um, and 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 I'm thinking like the sort of redemptive arc for him. We sort of have seen bits and pieces of that already, and I think like we'll see that come to a conclusion, and it will be just utterly heartbreaking because he is such a fascinating, damaged person, and so like yeah, just watching this, I'm like, oh god, oh god, oh god, he's yeah, like it's not going to end well for him, right? But again, I think that's going to be in pursuit of something bigger, and that's where they've. This is where all those characters are going to kind of find their meaning and purpose, at least in the short term, is like get her out, rescue her. She's what matters. Um, and then I think like maybe the other two can kind of find something beyond above and beyond that. Um, hopefully, I would take more from the series if they did by the end of it. If we saw kind of a postscript and we saw that they were living their lives elsewhere, um, I would appreciate that.
Just right quick, because you mentioned about that, we also got to see Wolf in the
Hmm.
trailer, which is
Mm-hmm.
interesting because we'll see him down the
In
line
Rebels.
later in Rebels. So, to your point about the clones as soldiers finding themselves a life beyond their service, life beyond the military, life beyond war, he's a good example of one that eventually does, in a kind of weird way, do that and then has to go back into it. So it's interesting that, yeah, he's back also.
Wouldn't it be cool if the clones who turned on the Jedi are somehow also involved in this path in saving Jedi? Wouldn't that be kind of a redemption story? But all that, Dave, how does all this? How is it? You think? How do you think it relates to a late '90s video game?
Well, to get into that, I think I should give the 3 minute summation of what we're even talking about here for the uninitiated. So, Dark Forces um, was a video game that came out in 1995, and even though this doesn't really encompass it fully, it was essentially Star Wars meets Doom. And so, if you know what Doom is, great. You know exactly what I'm talking about right off the bat. If you don't know what Doom is, um, Doom was basically the first hugely successful first person shooter video game. And it came out in 93, I think, and circa early 90s was the game. It was everywhere. It was Doom this, Doom that, Doom everything. And so LucasArts, in their wisdom, thought maybe we should try to graft a Star Wars story onto a Doom sort of experience and create what is in essence a Doom clone. Now, Doom clone, I'm using air quotes here, is kind of its own genre in video games because like they're notorious for years. The industry was dominated by Doom and all the clones. And
And
so
we're not talking about clone troopers here, everybody listening. We're talking about like basically copies of a video game. Yeah.
What'd you say, Fredo?
Duke Nukem, which
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, yeah, Doom, Quake, Duke Nukem. If you were video gaming in the mid to late 90s, first person shooters were everywhere. I mean, even more so than everybody talks about Call of Duty now, but back then, Doom 2, Doom 3, Quake. I mean, there's a whole department of IT as specialists who still have nightmares about the 90s and computer labs getting taken over by those games.
It was basically a decade or so there where it was Doom and all of the clones. And then it took nearly 10 years for other games to sort of like emerge from those shadows and establish themselves in a way that was really impactful and important. Uh, Half-Life, Halo, um, GoldenEye to a lesser degree, Metroid Prime, um, first-person experiences that like built off of what Doom had originally achieved. Um, so like everything for a long time was, and again, this isn't like derogatory, though it sounds sort of derogatory, the term Doom clone. Um, but everything for the longest time was just, this is fun, but it's not quite Doom, but it's fun. And so like that was sort of where Dark Forces landed in 1995 in trying to duplicate Doom's success. But I'm here to say it wasn't just a Doom clone. And I think we can begin to sort of appreciate its place in history better once we recognize that. Um, I got a list here of some things that it was managed to do that sort of set it apart from a lot of the competition at the time. I think it's an important game for those reasons. But I also think it's an important game because of the story elements, the characters, the impact that it had. Because circling back to like why we're sort of trying to connect these two things, and then we'll see how effective we are in that discussion. Connect this with current Star Wars. The Dark Troopers, amongst several other elements that were introduced here, came about because of dark forces. This is where that came from. If you remember, towards the end of Mandalorian season 2, it's like who are they fighting here? What are these creepy looking troopers that Moff Gideon is commanding here? Like, what's going on? Why Luke Skywalker's mowing these these uh, um, these evil looking dark troopers down, but like, what are they? Where did they come from? What is this all about? Um, the seed of that story element started with Dark Forces, and so like I think like I said, because I think it sort of it manages to achieve something that's not merely Doom clone, and because parts of story elements that it introduced are still active in the Star Wars canon, I think it's an important thing to talk about and look at and experience for people. Um, and so like this was sort of my take on it, and I may open the floor here for general impressions and thoughts. And lasting impact, we're going to go into some more of that. There was a lot There were sequels, there were offshoots, there were things that came about because this game existed. Um, but yeah, I recently replayed the game, and the other thing too, real briefly, it's about to be re-released. Um, this is meant to be a semi-timely discussion. Dark Forces is being re-released at the end of February, um, and it with new graphics, updated graphics, prettied up, remastered. Um,
On what platform?
Several
I,
PlayStation, PC, Switch, I think. Um, Let me see if I have the list here. But yeah, I open the floor.
yep, it's PC, PlayStation, both 4 and 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, Nintendo Switch. Yeah, it's yeah. So I'll just kind of mention briefly my own story, history with the game, because yeah, I mean, so Dark Forces comes out in 1995 when I just remember playing it in my friend's college buddy Mac, bless you, in his Mac in his dorm room, because again, this was back when everybody was playing Doom, Doom 2, Quake. What was interesting is much like kind of we're talking about uh, Bad Batch, the first Dark Forces game was just a straight up first person shooter. There was almost no force. You are a mercenary working for the rebellion who is infiltrating um, imperial facilities to obtain plans to sabotage or do. In a way, it's a lot similar in nature to Andor, what we saw in Andor, particularly in the middle of the season, where they're planning heists and they're planning missions and they're infiltrating and they're creating chaos. Yeah, that's what Dark Force is all about. The whole idea around it, though, centers on the concept of this Dark Trooper project, this idea that the Empire, some person or some general in the empire has of okay, we're going to take the standard stormtrooper and we're going to mechanize it, we're going to make it something that's smarter, deadlier, that doesn't get tired, doesn't need to be fed, can go from cold storage to killing rebels in no time flat. So and it was fun because you got to see Boba Fett, you got to see Jabba the Hutt, you got to go to Coruscant before before everybody even had seen Coruscant in the movie. So a lot of the story elements that uh, we'll get to later on, in the saga, kind of emerge out of here just because, LucasArts said, okay, everybody's liking those first-person shooting games. Let's make one of our own.
And Aaron, you said that you'd played it when
Very
you were
little.
younger.
I had it, and quite honestly, it was like didn't have the patience to constantly load the game on my computer, and I was lazy. So I'm gonna be honest. And I was never really into the first person shooter. But the reason why I got it was exactly what you said, Fredo. Was like, oh, okay, cool. This is you know Doom, but it was Star Wars, so it made me interested. But and when you don't have a machine that is gonna be able to you know truck hard enough to make it play well, like I said, just ended up collecting dust, quite honestly.
Yeah. And I think like that was a real hurdle at the time that a lot of people don't necessarily experience today. Like I guess if you're into PC gaming, um, you run into limitations and difficulty installing and things of that nature. But like back in the day, that was it, man. Like you had to figure these things out, and you're sitting
Yeah,
there
it's
with your
much
little floppy disks, and
it's much more a level playing field today because it's like, yeah, I mean, it's going to be coming out on all the different platforms. Um, Computers are also on a more even playing field because I had a Mac at the time, so that was even at that point it was even more of a wasn't as high performing as like my brother-in-law's PC. So yeah, so like I said, it's a much different world now.
I mean,
the reason.
I'll just say real quick before Dave continues. One of the things I remember, particularly towards the latter levels, because if you remember with a lot of the Doom clones is you would get the same background elements just refreshing and repeating. So it's quite easy to develop motion sickness if you're just staring at this wall that just keeps the same pixels reappearing over and over, but faster and faster. So that did happen to me on some of the latter levels when you're infiltrating some of those bases. And you're like, and of course the other half, which I'm sure if you play Doom, trying to find the wall with the button. Get you going to the next part of the level. You're like, right at the end, I can't go any further. I can't go back. Did I miss a key? No, you got to hit just right. Again, for a lot of modern day gamers, you just don't realize how much a lot of the development back then was trial and error. And a lot of times you didn't know there was an error until everybody was playing it at home.
So, what are your thoughts, Dave, about how this works into the Bad Batch?
So like, also I will say this, like, the motion sickness thing is real, because there was an exaggerated bobbing motion too. And if you haven't played this thing in a while, the guy's got it like his gun, and his gun is like going up and down, up and down, up and down, and like as if to simulate him sort of walking. But like I said, they made it too intense. So like that's a thing, and the visuals are ugly as sin, because like if you go back and you play this today, you're going to be like, what is going on? This is so ugly. Why did people, how do people play this? I don't even understand. um all of that needs to be acknowledged up front. I went back and I played this thing on Steam, because almost every game you can think of is available on Steam. um and I thought, goodness, it's been 30 years since I played this thing. So let me go back and see, is it any good? Well, 29 years, I guess. Technically not quite 30 yet. We're creeping up on 30 though. Um, but to answer your question, um, the Dark Trooper piece of this like makes me think like we're dealing with clones, we're dealing with cloning technology, we're dealing with stormtroopers. We've seen Dark Troopers make an appearance, um, so far in the series. Um, Again, like within the context of the game, it was more oriented around the idea that these were synthetic beings, and it was the synthetic that was elevating their performance. Um, but I think they sort of back wrote that in the sequels. And as you went along in the story, your main character became force sensitive, and the engine that they established here developed into a force sensitivity ability to play as a Jedi, which was not something that we'd really seen, at least not from a first person slash third person behind the shoulder perspective where you feel like you're the Jedi. Um, we had Super Star Wars and a few, few other things where you maybe got to sort of play around a little bit with those ideas. But what they established here, they built off of that and they developed it into um, a storyline which allowed you to take over that sort of role. And you were able to do it in a way that predated Knights of the Old Republic and some of the other games that would come along after the fact that we look at now as being like, wow, that's one of those all-time great Star Wars games, and it's because you can do force lightning, or you can do the super jump, or throw your lightsaber at people. Um, all of those things came out of this. This is where that started. Um, and again, like this game, the very first game in the series, you weren't force sensitive. You were a guy with a gun. You got a few guns to cycle through, and as you went along, your artillery increased, the strength of the enemies increased. Um, but these dark troopers would come at you like so and so's. Like it was just, it's intense. Um, it was like firing missiles at your head and everything, and it just, and like you'd see one, and it looked like the Terminator, like half formed, coming at you like the like Arnold Schwarzenegger without his face. Um, there's just like whoa, freak out moments galore. Um,
Hmm.
and the gory aspect of it, the horror aspect of it, I think like when these things pop back up in the canon, I was here for it because like that left an indelible mark on me originally playing those games. Like when they show up in Mandalorian, I'm like, oh my god, yes, I this is it. This is the stuff right here. These guys mean business. They're scary. You don't want to mess with them. And here's how I know, because I have dealt with them personally. It was me. Um, and so like that long-winded way of saying, when we look at Bad Batch right now and we're talking about cloning and force sensitivity and troopers and I I I go immediately into this area of Moff Gideon, dark troopers, and creating an army, so to speak. Maybe not an army of undead yet, but an army of force sensitive individuals.
Yeah, I'll say that, and this is, and you bring up two interesting points there that are quite true. One, the first game has a way more of a horror feel to it than any of the sequels. Just because, I mean, in you are very much when you play, and we've gone 30 minutes about this game. The character you play is called Kyle Katarn. They actually, what's funny is they actually do take him out of the video games and insert him into the novels. Like he's a character whose story you follow in the expanded universe and the Legends universe in the New Jedi Order novels. He's taking up, part with Luke and Leia and Han, and he comes out of these video games. But yeah, the first game, he was just a guy with a gun. Very smart guy, very competent agent of the rebellion, but he's just a guy with a gun, and he's discovering this almost Dr. Frankenstein level horror project that the Empire's involved in, which, let's face it, you would expect the Empire to be involved. The sequels, though, once they start giving him powers, and particularly like the first one, was it goes Dark Forces, then it goes Dark Forces 2, Jedi Knight. And I think somewhere by the sequel, they go the Jedi Knight thing is the thing that people latch on to, because it's the first time you get skill trees. The idea of light side powers and dark side powers comes out of here. The idea that you could design your own lightsaber in a video game. The idea that you could level up as a Jedi and learn how to do stuff, which the game would require you to do in order to achieve certain metrics, reach certain levels. The idea that you could lightsaber duel a bad guy or a villain in your path. You know, a lot of that stuff takes it out of the horror element because let's face it, the Jedi are not going to be scared of anything. You can put a Jedi in the middle of like, you know, Dr. Frankenstein's level, they're gonna be like, we can deal with this. But a normal regular Joe Schmo is gonna be freaking out. They don't freak out. So, but it's such an interesting element that this story kind of goes from your standard first-person shooter Doom clone, and once it finds its way to giving you force powers and a lightsaber, the whole series changed, and it goes through three more games. And the other thing that's interesting, you could tell how gaming kind of shifts from the first game to say maybe that Jedi Knight 2. Because in the first game, it's very much a LucasArts animated game where you're getting cutscenes that are all animated, meaning they're all cell shaded. It's a lot like, say, Return to Monkey Island or Grim Fandango or those kind of LucasArts video games, the early 90s stuff, or Full Throttle. Whereas by the mid to late 90s Jedi Knight, Jedi Knight 2, you're getting animated cutscenes with people dressed in really poor costumes. And I'll be fair, the level of acting here, is somewhere between community theater and you know, it's an off to the 27th Power Broadway. It's not the greatest. I'll be kind of say that it's very stilted. I mean, you get Mary Jade in Jedi Knight and Dark Forces too, so it's always like, oh, Mary Jade's here. They're even back then they're like finding ways to kind of bring all these elements of the expanded universe together. Uh, but it's an interesting series because the moment they make that switch to here you go, you're a Jedi, here's your lightsaber, level up your force powers, the horror just goes away because you can't really tell me that the Jedi's are gonna get scared here. So, but it's a lot of fun, and I mean, geez, I wasted so many hours on Jedi Knight too, just leveling up that tree.
So if we don't get like the specific, Dark Trooper story elements here, I kind of suspect we might. We may not. I think it's like that horror element. And I think like cloning by its very nature sort of like goes into that. Like there's this idea behind it that's a very primal idea of no, there's one me. I don't want there to be more me's out there. Um, and it really sort of affects your perspective on things to just have that viewpoint attacked. Like, oh, there's the possibility that there could be more use, and here they are. Or, oh, we're just going to graft evil onto evil incarnate and robotics onto a stormtrooper to make them more powerful and actually scary as opposed to the misfiring goofs that we all know and love. Um, there's a lot of like creep show elements going on in the undertones of this. And so this game like was swimming in the deep end with some of this stuff. Like you didn't see this in mainstream Star Wars. Not to mention the fact this was like the dead period, right? For Star Wars. When this game came out, yeah, it was a Doom clone. But yeah, it was Star Wars content in 1995 when we had virtually nothing else. Um, the prequels wouldn't come along until 1999. The special editions not till 97. Um, we had the books and some role-playing games and those Super Nintendo games. Other than that, it was PC gaming, and we'd seen some flight simulators that were pretty cool.
My fighter.
Mm-hmm. But this was something else. This was, and again, like this is one of the reasons that it's not just a Doom clone to me. It it incorporated polygons in a really good way, like better than we'd seen to that point. The surfaces were more detailed. You had a ship that would fly in during gameplay. You're just, chugging along and you're like, I need a pickup, because my mission's over. Your ship would come down in. And it was one of these polygon looking, like Star Fox looking ships, but it was like incorporated into the game while you're running around with your gun. And so, like, that was really cool and advanced for the time. You had the ability to look up and down with your gun and point your gun at targets above you and below you. That was not a thing. Like, Doom, it was straight ahead. That was it. And you could strafe. But you couldn't look up or down. Like, that was a thing now. You can suddenly do this. Dark Forces introduced puzzle elements. You were talking about sometimes it was mystifying. You're like, oh, I need this key that I got from this Imperial officer to decode this puzzle at this other end of this maze. And it's like there were times where you're like, wait, I gotta go look this up. I don't know what I'm doing here. But it indicated a more cerebral approach to this stuff, which wasn't always the case with shooters because it was just mostly bang bang and kill as many people as you can at that time. So like they were attempting to do something more with it. And then again, the honest to goodness story, um, which is why the horror elements sort of worked as well as they did. They were able to build them up. They were telling you the story as you went along, and you were like, they're developing these creep show troopers. They're going to try to kill you. You've got to shut this program down. And oh, by the way, they're going to want to kill you. They're going to you, right? Um, and above and beyond this idea of blow everything up, shoot everything that moves, you're dealing with story. And with like Doom, it was like, go to hell, kill the bad guys, and get home. Like that was it. And then like every Doom clone, it was kind of the same thing. And with Dark Forces, it was a freaking story. It was a story. And like I can tell you 100%, this was pretty advanced stuff for the time that it came out because I just replayed this game and I really enjoyed the story elements here. Um, I've been trying to put these sorts of games in context. I've been going back and I've been playing older stuff and trying to figure out like, well, what led to what led to what? Why is so and so important, etc., etc. And this game told a story, and again, with horror elements that were really sort of impactful, and story elements that ultimately current story creators decided we should draw from that. That's still valuable. That's valid. What they were doing then is cool or interesting. Let's riff on that. Let's use that. And I just think like that's the ultimate compliment. And here we are in 2024 still talking about this game that's 29 years old now. And again, if somebody is like, they hear this discussion, they think, oh, I'd like to maybe go check it out. It's going to be ugly as sin. Maybe wait for the re-release that's coming out at the end of February. It'll be a little bit better. I know that much. But they're doing stuff in this game they were not doing in Doom. And like I said, Half-Life, Halo,
Yeah.
those sorts of immersive, story-driven experiences. I honestly feel like Dark Forces did it first. Maybe not quite as well. Maybe not as pretty a game. But like here it is, man. I went back and I played this thing, and I was like, "What?" I was waiting for it to just be this ugly thing that was just rudimentary as heck, and like I was gonna be like, "Nope, nope, 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 not worth your time, not worth anybody's time." And instead, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed revisiting it, and for Aaron and for others who are like, "Well, I'm not sure. I didn't really like it the first time around." Um, I can't promise you that it'll be any better this go around. Um, but for people who are sort of interested in video game history, interested in Star Wars history, um, haven't experienced this game, it might be worth your while to check it out here in another month or so.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if any of those elements do make it into the current, whether it's Bad Batch or Ahsoka or anything like that. So it'll be cool. So,
Fredo,
Yeah.
did you have anything else to add?
Uh, no, and I think, but I think that the warning you kind of give is probably the best. Wait for the remaster, because the reality is you are talking about a 30-year-old game, and there is some charm to classic video games. You know this better than I do. Actually, both do in terms of when you play something from the heyday of the 80s and you get 8-bit quality glory, and it's just there's something warm and comforting about it. When you think back to gaming in the 90s, there was such an upheaval because computing power is now getting in the hands of people who could, in their garages, in their spare bedroom, in their offices, do a lot of great things. I mean, People forget Doom was invented by, created by four guys in an office space. So, now it takes a whole army of engineers and programmers and developers, and you know, so while you gotta respect the ingenuity, you also have to go back and kind of grade it on a curve because there's not as much charm in some of those early PC games of the '90s, early to mid '90s. But at the same time, yeah, 100%. What you're seeing in Dark Forces is one of those things that um, you also see in a lot of PC gaming of that era where they are making up for the lack of power that they have, meaning computing power, processing power, with storytelling. This is, I mean, where you get stuff like whether it's Warcraft or Starcraft for real-time strategy or Command and Conquer. You also get stuff like Fallout, the original Fallout games, which are all very much traditional storytelling adventures. You get stuff like even like Myst, which are puzzle gaming to the extreme. I don't know if you ever played that. That game's a mind trip. Anyway, point being, there was a lot of creativity at that point because the technology is getting in people's hands, but also when you go back and replay and revisit it, there's not the level of necessary charm that a Donkey Kong would have. It's not gonna have the level of charm that a Super Mario Brothers is going to have. Like you could pick up the original Legend of Zelda and play it right now and understand its limitations and fall in love with it all over again. You're not necessarily going to do that with a lot of the games of the early to mid '90s because they don't have that. But what they do have in spades, a lot of that storytelling. I think Dark Forces does that for Star Wars gaming. That's You can draw a through line from Shadows of the Empire through Dark Forces to Knights of the Old Republic to everything we get today. Everything from Jedi Survivor to Battlefront and everything in between. Because it does that level of creativity that was given to those creators, those developers back then, because they're like, well, we don't know what we're doing, figure it out. And sometimes the easy solution is just simply go, well, it's not that we don't have the power to render that. It's congratulations, you've reached the end of this level. Now you must get into this ship and go cutscene. This where you're fixing the cutscene. So they don't have the charm of the old 8-bit generation, but they have their own unique thing. But yeah, if you're going to play this game, February 28th is when it drops on Steam and all the other platforms and um, consoles. Pick it up. It's an interesting game, in terms of historical for Star Wars.
Cool. Anything else for the good of the order before we sign off for the week? If
I mean,
not,
in
you
terms
can hit us up on Twitter, on Facebook. Let us know what you thought about the Bad Batch trailer. If you've played Dark Forces, or if you've been inspired to go play Dark Forces, let us know what you think. If you'll definitely get some responses from Dave if you're talking video games. So, like I said, hit us up, let us know what you think, and until then, we will say who dat.
Yeah.
Have a good week, everybody.
McClunky.